There is something very soothing about old questions, especially the ones that wait patiently in the ground, or in a museum drawer, or in a line of faded symbols on stone. Some mysteries are dramatic and some are quiet. Some sit in the dark for centuries, and then, little by little, a careful modern tool or a new way of looking gives them a calmer shape. Tonight, we can spend some time with a few of those old puzzles, not in a hurried way and not with too much certainty all at once. Just a slow walk through ancient places, old materials, and recent discoveries, with plenty of room for the mind to rest. In many cases, the answer was never hidden in a single grand clue. It was made from many small clues, gathered gently. A crack in pottery, a pattern in the soil, a tiny bit of preserved plant matter, a marking on bone, a trace of pigment, a shadow in a stone chamber. Taken alone, each clue seems quiet. Together, they begin to speak. That is one of the peaceful things about archaeology and history. The work is often slow. It depends on patience. It rewards attention to little things. And even when the answer arrives, it usually feels less like a sudden announcement and more like a soft clearing of the air. One modern mystery that has become easier to understand is the story of ancient genomes, the long records stored inside bones and teeth. For a very long time, people could only guess at how groups moved, mixed, and changed. They had pottery styles, burial customs, old tools, and written records where those survived. But the human body itself still held older information, quietly preserved in fragments. In the last decade, DNA science has moved forward in a careful and remarkable way. Small pieces of ancient genetic material have been recovered from old remains, sometimes from places where people never expected much to survive. This has shown that ancient populations were often more mixed, more mobile, and more connected than older maps suggested. The picture is not always neat. That is part of its beauty. Human history is not a straight line. It is a wide set of crossings, pauses, returns, and shared paths. People traveled for trade, for family, for work, for survival, and for many reasons that are now only partly visible. The DNA evidence has helped historians and archaeologists see some of those movements more clearly. A few long-standing ideas have become softer at the edges. Some groups once thought to have appeared suddenly now look more gradual. Some ancient settlements once seen as isolated now appear to have had visitors, exchange, and influence from far away. The land was never still, and people were never entirely still either. It is restful to think of history in this way, as a network of quiet contact. A vessel carried across water, a marriage joining households, a tool's style spreading from one region to another, a crop arriving in a new valley, a bit of language changing as people borrowed from their neighbors. Small motions, repeated over long periods, slowly shape the world. Another mystery, long discussed and now better understood, involves ancient writing systems and the patience needed to read them. There are scripts that once seemed nearly locked away from modern understanding. Some were partly readable, some only partially known, and some became clearer only when new inscriptions were found or when old ones were studied with digital methods. In the last decade, imaging tools have improved greatly. High-resolution photography, 3D scanning, reflectance techniques, and digital comparison have helped scholars notice marks that the eye might miss in ordinary light. A faded sign carved into stone can become more legible. A damaged tablet can reveal more of its shape. A fragment can be compared with a dozen other fragments, and a pattern slowly appears. This kind of work is not flashy. It is careful and often repetitive. The same line is checked again. The same curve is traced. The same symbol is compared with another from a different site, perhaps hundreds of miles away. Yet this is often how long-lost systems speak again, not through noise, but through patient attention. There is comfort in that, too. The mind can rest in a story where effort matters, and where small observations accumulate. A broken piece of history is not always lost. Sometimes it is only waiting for a kinder light. A separate ancient mystery lives not in language, but in burial grounds. For many years, archaeologists wondered about certain unusual tombs, especially those built with clear care but without obvious signs of the people buried there. Who were they, and why were they placed in those particular ways? Were they high status, travelers, children, relatives, outsiders, or members of some specific group? Recent scientific study has helped answer some of those questions. Isotope analysis, for example, can show where a person likely grew up, based on the chemical signature in teeth and bones. Different soils, waters, and foods leave different traces, so someone buried in one place may have spent early life somewhere else entirely. Another person may have lived locally all their life. A burial chamber can then become a map of movement, not just a resting place. That is a quiet kind of discovery. It does not change the shape of the stones themselves, but it changes the story inside them. A tomb may once have seemed to describe only rank or ritual. Now it can also hint at migration, marriage, exchange, and regional identity. A few archaeological sites have also been illuminated by soil chemistry and ancient environmental study. This is one of the more elegant developments of the last decade. By examining pollen, seeds, charcoal, mineral traces, and layers of sediment, researchers can reconstruct landscapes that no longer exist. A city that seems barren today may once have stood beside wetlands, gardens, or managed fields. A settlement that looks remote now may once have been near a river branch that has since shifted away. Some roads are lost not because people forgot them, but because the land itself changed its mind over many centuries. This can feel almost like listening to the earth breathing slowly. A lake recedes, a river bends, wind carries fine dust across a plain. Plants return after fire, and then new plants, and then new use by human hands. The old environment is not gone entirely. It lingers in layers, in fragments, in traces. One mystery that has gained clarity is how some ancient cities were organized. In earlier decades, archaeologists sometimes assumed simple patterns, imagining a clear center and then a softer edge. But newer survey methods, especially wide area mapping and ground-penetrating techniques, have shown that many settlements were more complex. There may have been workshops farther out than expected, and storage areas in surprising places, and roads or canals that linked neighborhoods in ways that were not obvious from the surface. Some cities were not built like modern grids with easy order from above. They were layered, practical, and responsive to terrain. That makes them feel a little more human. Real communities grow in pieces. They adapt to weather, water, trade, and custom. They leave behind an arrangement that can look puzzling at first, but often makes sense once more evidence is gathered. The last decade has also brought better understanding of ancient diets. This is another gentle field because it depends so much on small leftovers. A seed charred by cooking, a residue inside pottery, wear on teeth, chemical traces in bone. These fragments can tell us what people ate, what they raised, what they gathered, and sometimes how they shifted diets over generations. In some regions, researchers have discovered more agricultural variety than was once assumed. People did not always rely on one crop alone. They used grains, legumes, fruits, fish, livestock, wild plants, and local resources, depending on season and place. Even in old societies that seem fixed in our imagination, daily life was often flexible. That flexibility is easy to forget. We picture ancient people as if they lived under one clear label, but they were practical, adaptive, and responsive. They cooked what was available. They traded for what was scarce. They changed when climate changed. They observed. They remembered. They adjusted. Another peaceful example comes from the study of ancient trade routes. For a long time, historians knew that distant regions were connected, but the exact paths of goods were sometimes uncertain. Recent work using residue studies, chemical sourcing, and detailed artifact comparison has shown that materials moved along broader networks than expected. A bead might have been made from stone that came from far away. A metal object might contain ore from a different region. A jar style might match another settlement hundreds of miles off. These traces suggest long, quiet conversations between communities. Not always grand empires, not always battles, often just persistent exchange. Trade is one of the oldest forms of relationship. It is practical, but it is also social. People trust one another enough to pass things along. They learn one another's needs. They develop habits of return. A route becomes familiar. A harbor becomes known. A market grows slowly and then becomes part of memory. There are mysteries in old architecture as well, and some of them have recently become clearer through laser scanning and digital reconstruction. Walls that looked nearly featureless can reveal hidden alignments. Chambers that seemed random can show careful planning. Decorative patterns can be seen again when shadows are removed by computer analysis. This has happened at temples, tombs, fortifications, and ceremonial spaces. The stone itself remains ancient, but the understanding of it changes. It is rather lovely to think that a structure can wait so many centuries and then, with a different kind of light, show a little more of its design. Even ruined places carry order. A doorway may align with the sun at a certain season. A corridor may frame a view of the landscape. A courtyard may catch the wind in a way that matters in summer. Builders in the ancient world were often attentive to practical and symbolic needs at the same time. In many cases, the recent decade has not provided a single final answer. Instead, it has narrowed the possibilities. That alone can be enough. To know that a buried wall belonged to a water system, rather than a defensive barrier, changes the story in a quiet but meaningful way. To know that a symbol was likely local rather than imported shifts an entire interpretation. Small corrections can be very important. One especially gentle kind of modern discovery comes from studying objects held in museum collections for a long time. Sometimes an artifact was excavated decades ago and then set aside because the available methods were not enough. Then new analysis comes along. A new scanner, a new X-ray method, a new statistical model. The old object is seen again. This can happen with jewelry, tools, figurines, tablets, or fragments of cloth. A piece thought to be ornamental may prove to have had another function. A pigment may be identified. A repair mark may reveal repeated use. The object becomes less like a relic and more like a lived thing, handled by real people with everyday concerns. That is one of the most calming parts of studying the past. It returns humanity to distant times. Ancient people were not abstract symbols. They were makers, carriers, parents, travelers, cooks, workers, children, elders. They dealt with weather and hunger, ceremony and routine, fear and affection, all in the ordinary texture of life. A mystery that has become clearer in recent years concerns ancient technology and the way it spread. For a long time, the appearance of a new tool or building method in one region and then another could seem abrupt. Yet careful study has shown that innovations often moved in stages. A technique might begin in one workshop, then be copied imperfectly nearby, then be adapted to local materials, and only later become common. This slower process is easier to miss if one looks only at final forms. But when many sites are compared, the gradual spread appears. Change often moves like a soft wave, not like a sudden splash. Even the history of ceramics, simple as pottery can seem, contains many such patterns. Clay tells stories. Firing temperature matters. Local soil matters. Decoration matters. Vessel shape matters. And with modern analysis, scholars can often determine where a pot was made, what it carried, and sometimes how it was used in a household or ritual setting. A pot that traveled far may suggest trade. A pot made locally in foreign style may suggest imitation or cultural blending. A collection of vessels in one site may show cooking habits, storage methods, or communal feasting. Quiet details, but they gather into a broader picture. Some ancient mysteries are solved not by finding something new, but by rereading what was already known. That can be especially true for inscriptions and fragments. One line on a stone might seem unclear until it is compared with hundreds of other examples. A short phrase may suddenly make sense in context. A title, a place name, or a date can reframe a whole record. The work is often collaborative now. Historians, linguists, chemists, geologists, geneticists, and computer specialists all contribute. In the past, a single scholar might try to know everything. Today, larger teams can see more. That too is a quiet change in the study of ancient things. It reminds us that knowledge grows in layers, just like the archaeological record. One layer is examined, then another. One method is added, then another. The old and the new sit together, and the view becomes more complete. There is also something soothing about the fact that many of these discoveries do not erase the mystery entirely. They only make it more proportionate. Ancient life remains distant. We do not know every name, every story, every reason, but we know enough to feel the contours of it. A town that once seemed silent now has a little more voice. A burial that once seemed strange now has a little more context. A script that once looked unreadable now carries a few more words into daylight. That balance between ignorance and understanding is very human. We live with it every day, not just in history. We know some things and not others. We interpret. We revise. We accept partial answers. There is a kind of peace in that. Modern science has also helped with ancient climate, and this has clarified many old puzzles. Long ago, people moved, adapted, or sometimes abandoned places because weather patterns changed. Rain came differently. Dry seasons lengthened. Floods altered fields. Coastlines shifted. What once looked like a sudden cultural break can, in some cases, be better understood as a response to environmental change. Ice cores, lake sediments, cave deposits, tree rings, and marine samples all contribute to this picture. Each carries a record, subtle and patient. Together, they show that the ancient world was never fixed. It was always in conversation with climate, just as we are now, though in very different ways. This helps explain why some settlements flourished for centuries and then gradually thinned. It helps explain why farming spread in some places and remained limited in others. It helps explain why old routes opened and closed. The land was not merely a stage. It was part of the story. A final kind of recent discovery comes from ancient art. For years, some painted walls and carved scenes were interpreted only from what was visible to the naked eye. But newer imaging has revealed underdrawings, revisions, erased figures, and original colors that have faded almost completely. This can change the meaning of a scene in a subtle way. A gesture may have been altered. A figure may have been added later. A symbol may have been painted over. What once looked fixed can turn out to have been revised, just like a manuscript with corrections. Ancient artists, too, experimented, changed their minds, or responded to new circumstances. That is a comforting thought. It makes the past feel less like a finished museum case and more like a working world. People adjusted what they made. They changed an image. They repaired a vessel. They reused a wall. They repainted a chamber. They lived among objects that changed with them. And so, across the last decade, many ancient mysteries have become a little more legible. Not all at once, not in one dramatic movement, but through patient science, careful measurement, and repeated attention to details that had long been overlooked. A burial tells us about movement. A tablet tells us about language. A bone tells us about diet. A layer of soil tells us about water. A pigment tells us about art. A piece of DNA tells us about family and migration. Each clue is small, and each clue is enough to soften the darkness a little. There is no need to hold all of it tightly. The mind can simply let it pass by like a quiet procession of stones, fields, letters, and footprints. Ancient life was complex, and modern discovery is complex too, but both can be approached gently. As the night grows softer, it is enough to remember that the past is still being understood, a little at a time. Questions that seemed closed can open again. Old objects can speak in new ways. Patient work can travel across centuries. And now, with no hurry at all, we can let those distant places settle back into silence. The city walls, the tombs, the tablets, the bones, the gardens, the roads, all resting in their own time. The answers remain, quietly arranged in layers of earth and thought. It is pleasant in the end to know that the world can still yield a few gentle truths. Not all at once, and not loudly, but softly, through time. So we can leave them there for tonight, the ancient questions, now a little less uncertain, and let our own thoughts grow lighter. The room is still. The air is calm. The long work of discovery can rest, and so can we. And as we rest, it is easy to imagine how many more answers are waiting in places that have not yet been fully explored. There are shelves in museums where fragments sit in quiet rows, their labels simple, their stories still unfolding. There are archives where old notes, copied by hand, continue to be reread with fresh eyes. There are buried rooms that have not yet been opened, and sealed vessels that hold traces of meals, oils, resins, and grains from long ago. Sometimes science notices what no one expected to matter. A tiny residue on the inside of a jar can tell us what was stored there. A faint trace of pollen can reveal the kinds of plants that once grew nearby. A small pattern in the wear on a tool can show how it was held and what it touched most often. Even a single seed, preserved in dry soil or ancient ash, can carry a memory of cultivation, trade, or local harvest. This is one of the quiet pleasures of modern archaeology. It does not only seek monuments or famous names, it also listens to the humble things. A broken spoon, a patch of soot, a cracked bead, a thimble-sized amulet, a fragment of woven cloth, a soot-darkened hearth. Each object is small, but each object belongs to a life, and lives are often made of small, repeated acts. Someone once stirred a pot in the evening. Someone once repaired a torn garment. Someone once set aside a favored stone or shell because it had meaning. Someone carried water. Someone counted sheep. Someone told a child to wait a little longer before sleep. The ordinary details are not less important than the grand ones. In many ways, they are the ones that make the grand ones understandable. And the methods used to uncover these details are often as delicate as the findings themselves. High-resolution imaging can bring out faint lines in a manuscript that the eye alone can barely detect. Microscopic analysis can identify the fibers in a textile. Chemical tests can distinguish plant oils from animal fats. Isotope studies can suggest where a person may have lived or what they ate across the seasons. The work is careful, measured, and patient, like watching a fog lift slowly from a river. It is soothing to think that knowledge can arrive this way, not as a rush, but as a gradual clearing. A little more is seen, then a little more. What once seemed anonymous can become familiar. What once seemed confusing can become patterned. And what once seemed lost may still leave a trace. There are places where this patience has changed history in very tender ways. In one region, ancient burial grounds have revealed that communities were more connected than once thought, with people moving between villages, valleys, and coastlines. In another, the arrangement of seeds and hearths has shown how people shifted their farming practices in response to cooler years or drier decades. Elsewhere, stone tools and ceramics have suggested that trade networks were not merely long lines on a map, but living relationships among families, neighbors, and travelers. These relationships mattered. A shared technique could travel with a potter. A style of bead could move with a bride. A recipe could pass from one household to another. A method for storing grain could spread because it worked well in a particular climate. In this way, culture can be understood not only as something symbolic, but as something practical and intimate, shaped by daily needs and human trust. Even language leaves quiet traces. Sometimes researchers compare words across old inscriptions and later dialects, noticing how sounds shifted or how meanings drifted over time. A word for river may survive in a place name. A term for metal may appear in a trade record. A royal title may begin as a simple honorific and grow into something more formal. These small linguistic changes can be as revealing as layers of stone because they show how people thought, adapted, and remembered. There is something gentle in the idea that language, like a landscape, changes little by little. Not all at once, not in a sudden movement. It bends with use. It softens with repetition. It keeps old echoes inside new forms. And when scholars find those echoes, they are not only recovering a word, they are recovering a way of being with one another. Some of the most moving discoveries come from the study of children in ancient societies. Tiny shoes, miniature vessels, small fingerprints pressed into clay, and burials marked with care all remind us that ancient worlds included tenderness, family life, and protection. Children learned by watching. They learned by helping. They learned by listening to stories spoken in the evening. Their presence was woven into homes, workshops, and fields, even when the archaeological record only hints at it. Modern science can sometimes bring this into softer focus. The size of skeletal remains can suggest age at death. Wear on the teeth can suggest certain diets or repeated habits. The contents of nearby vessels can suggest what families may have eaten or shared. Even the placement of a small object beside a child can suggest affection, ritual, or remembrance. The details are quiet, but they matter. And so the ancient world slowly becomes less distant. It is no longer only kings and empires. It is also bread kneaded by hand, water carried in the cool part of the day, wool spun by lamplight, tools passed from one pair of hands to another. It is a world of thresholds and courtyards, of roads and riverbanks, of smoke drifting upward in the evening. It is a world made from living time. The same is true for ancient homes, which often reveal more than one might first expect. A house is not only walls and a roof. It is a record of movement, where people slept, where they cooked, where they stored grain, where they kept objects they valued, where ash collected, where floors were repaired, where a doorway was widened or narrowed. When these features are studied carefully, they can show how families changed over generations. In some places, there are signs of rebuilding after fire or flood. In others, floors were renewed many times, each layer adding to the story beneath. Sometimes a room was repurposed. A storage area became a workshop. A courtyard became a place for animals. A shrine became a place of family memory. These changes remind us that ancient people lived flexibly, responding to the world around them with the same practical intelligence people still use today. There is also a quiet dignity in the materials themselves. Clay, stone, bronze, wood, wool, shell, reed, bone. None of these are grand by themselves, but together they form the texture of a civilization. They were shaped by hand, by heat, by pressure, by patience. And because they survived in fragments, they invite a slower kind of attention. One piece can suggest another. One fragment can complete a pattern. One broken edge can fit against another after centuries apart. Sometimes the newest insights come not from a single spectacular object, but from combining many ordinary traces. A settlement pattern may line up with climate data. A burial may align with genetic evidence. A workshop may correspond with residue analysis. When these different strands point in the same direction, the story becomes steadier, more believable, and more human. It is a gentle kind of certainty, built from many small confirmations. That same steadiness appears in the study of ancient diets. For a long time, people imagined some populations only in broad terms, as hunters, farmers, herders, or traders. But modern methods show a more varied picture. One community may have eaten grains, fish, and wild plants depending on the season. Another may have relied on stored foods through a dry period and fresh produce after rains returned. Another may have mixed domesticated crops with gathered foods in ways that were local and sensible. Teeth can preserve these stories. Tiny scratches may hint at hard seeds or grit from stone-ground flour. Chemical signatures in bones can show a balance of land and sea foods. Plant remains in hearths can point to herbs, roots, or fruits that were once common in nearby fields. All of this deepens our understanding of how people lived day by day and how they remained in conversation with the land. The land itself, of course, keeps its own memory. River channels move, dunes drift, forests thin or expand. Fields are abandoned and later cultivated again. Harbors silt up. Springs shift. Earthquakes alter coastlines or walls. Some ruins that seem far inland today were once near water. Some sites now surrounded by dry earth were once beside marsh or lake. This changing geography can be seen, with enough patience, in the layers beneath the surface. And when these changes are understood, ancient societies seem less like static civilizations and more like people with practical knowledge of their environment. They knew when to plant, when to store, when to migrate, when to rebuild. They knew how to follow a river, how to read weather, how to notice the first signs of trouble in a crop or herd. They watched the world carefully because their lives depended on it. In that sense, modern science is simply extending the same habit of attention. It watches carefully too. It notices patterns in dust and pollen, in bones and stones, in ratios and fragments. It asks what changed when it changed and how people responded. It does not remove the mystery entirely, but it makes room for understanding. It allows the past to be seen not as a set of fixed legends, but as lived reality. Sometimes a single detail can quietly alter a long-held assumption. A text believed to describe war may in another reading describes ceremony. A building thought to be a fortress may turn out to have been a palace or administrative center. A vessel assumed to be purely decorative may show traces of use. A burial thought to be solitary may reveal connections to a wider family plot. These revisions are not loud. They simply make the picture a little truer. And it is often in those small revisions that history becomes more beautiful. Not because the old ideas were wrong in a dramatic way, but because the new evidence adds nuance. People were not simply warriors or priests, farmers or merchants. They were often several things at once. A person could farm seasonally and trade at market, craft tools and participate in ritual, raise children and travel. Ancient identities were layered like soil. This layered quality appears especially clearly in cities. Cities leave complicated records because they were places of movement, exchange, and density. Streets were repaired, widened, or redirected. Drainage channels were dug and later altered. Markets expanded. Workshops clustered near roads. Religious spaces changed with time. Homes became taller or smaller. The city was never one thing for long. It was always adjusting to the lives inside it. Modern technologies can now read some of these changes from above as well as below. Satellite imagery can show buried walls where vegetation grows differently. Ground-penetrating radar can reveal hidden structures without disturbing them. Drone photography can map entire sites gently and efficiently. These tools are helpful not only because they are precise, but because they preserve what they study. They allow curiosity to remain respectful. That respect matters. It reminds us that archaeology is not about taking the past apart for spectacle. It is about listening with care. It is about understanding that graves are places of memory, that ruins are the remains of homes, that inscriptions were once read by living eyes. The ancient world is not a puzzle only for our entertainment. It was the place where people loved, worked, feared, hoped, and slept. When science uncovers something new, the best response is often a kind of quiet gratitude. Gratitude for the object that survived. Gratitude for the climate or accident that preserved it. Gratitude for the researchers who sat over it with patience. Gratitude for the simple fact that traces remain at all. The past is not fully gone. It is only partly hidden. There are also discoveries that concern time itself. Not just dates, but rhythms. How long a building was used. How often a field was planted. How many generations occupied the same hillside? How frequently a ritual was repeated? These rhythms matter because they show continuity. A community is not defined only by its beginnings or endings, but by the steady pace of repeated life. Dendrochronology, the study of tree rings, can reveal years of abundance or stress. Radiocarbon dating can place organic remains within a range of time. Layered sediments can show sequences of flooding or calm. When these methods are combined, the pace of ancient life becomes more visible. We can see seasons within years and years within centuries, all arranged in patient order. That order can be deeply calming to consider, not because the ancient world was simple, but because it was lived through repetition. Dawn after dawn, harvest after harvest, repair after repair, feast after feast, loss after loss. The same paths walked again and again. The same stars appearing over different roofs. The same rivers changing very slowly. The same need for shelter, food, kinship, and meaning. And now, as the night deepens, those repeating patterns can become a kind of lullaby. The ancient city falls quiet. The workshop cools. The ink dries, the jar is sealed. The lamp is lowered. The grain is stored. The path along the wall is empty. Somewhere a dog settles near a doorway. Somewhere else a gate is closed against the wind. The world, always changing, pauses for a little while. It is interesting how often science reveals not just information, but texture. A surface once thought smooth may be worn by many hands. A wall once thought plain may carry traces of pigment. A bone once thought inert may hold signs of disease, diet, or recovery. A text once thought broken may be reconstructed enough to show a name, a prayer, or a list of goods. Each recovered detail brings a little warmth to the record. Because of this, ancient history can feel less remote and less monumental in the harsh sense. It becomes intimate. Not because it is small, but because it is familiar. The things people needed then are the things people need now. Water, bread, shelter, safety, memory, a place to rest. A way to say, I was here and this mattered. Many discoveries simply help us hear that message a little more clearly. There is something especially quiet about artifacts connected to writing. Clay tablets impressed with wedges, papyrus fragments, wooden tags, inked shards, wax tablets, seals, and inscriptions on stone all preserve a moment when someone tried to make thought visible. A list of offerings, a letter to a relative, a contract, a poem, a prayer, a tax record, a brief complaint about a missing item. The tone may vary, but the impulse is the same, to keep a thought from disappearing. When digital imaging recovers faded letters or hidden layers of text, it can feel like listening to a voice that had nearly gone still. Yet even then, the discoveries are often modest. A line restored, a name clarified, a date corrected, a missing phrase completed. These small recoveries may not stir crowds, but they deepen understanding in a durable way. They remind us that knowledge grows by care, not by noise. The same is true of ancient metals. Corrosion can hide forms that were once bright and useful. Yet with careful study, researchers can identify alloy mixtures, tool marks, manufacturing techniques, and repair patterns. A bronze mirror may reveal a workshop tradition. A sword may show repeated sharpening. A pin may carry traces of wear from cloth or hair. A simple household tool may show just how often it was used and how well it was loved by the hand that held it. Sometimes the most revealing thing is repair. A repaired object shows value. It shows thrift, skill, and attachment. It shows that people did not simply discard what broke. They mended it. They reused it. They made it serve again. This pattern appears in everything from pottery to textiles, from wooden furniture to stone buildings. It is a practical wisdom that still feels very close. And because of that, the ancient world can teach a quieter lesson about resilience. Not heroic resilience, not the kind spoken of in grand speeches, but ordinary resilience. The resilience of households that stretched supplies through winter. The resilience of communities that rebuilt after flood. The resilience of travelers who adjusted routes when roads failed. The resilience of scribes who copied texts for the next generation. The resilience of gardeners who waited for rain. The resilience of people who kept going, one day at a time. Even royal and elite remains, when studied carefully, become less abstract and more human. A crown or tomb may seem distant at first, but scientific analysis can show what foods were eaten, what illnesses were present, what materials were imported, what local resources were prized. The person buried in splendor was still shaped by a body, a climate, a household, and a history. Power does not remove humanity. It only changes the form in which it is expressed. And so the ancient world, once imagined as fixed and distant, becomes fluid and near. It is full of movement, adaptation, and continuity. It is full of people making choices within limits. It is full of careful hands and watchful eyes. It is full of winters endured and springs anticipated. It is full of names now half lost and places still waiting to be understood. As we let these thoughts drift by, there is no need to hold on to every detail. The mind can simply rest in the feeling of discovery itself. A fragment found, a pattern noticed, a story revised, a silence respected. The whole effort of modern science in the realm of ancient history can be seen as a patient lamp carried through a dark corridor, illuminating one doorway at a time. And when the lamp is lowered, the corridor remains quiet and intact. The objects rest where they were found. The soils keep their layered memories. The inscriptions wait. The bones wait. The seeds wait. The painted walls wait in softened color. The old paths remain beneath the earth, patient as ever. There is peace in that patience. So tonight, we can let the past continue to settle and allow our own thoughts to do the same. Let the questions grow gentle. Let the facts become soft shapes in the dark. Let the ancient world remain what it has become through careful science. Not lost, not fully known, but quietly present with enough mystery left to be restful. And now, as the room grows even quieter, we can leave the scholars to their measuring, the layers to their silence, and the old stories to their slow unfolding. The night does not need every answer. It only needs calm. It only needs the steady breathing of a world at rest. So we rest too, with the long human story folded softly around us, and the ancient secrets, uncovered at last by modern light, settling back into the dark where they can sleep until morning.